And welcome everyone to the AfA Connect 2024. This session is focusing on farm animal. And my name is Thanh. I'm the lead coordinator of the AfA Farm Animal Coalition, and I'm your host today. Today we are going to learn from two prestigious speakers about two very big, very important initiatives that have the global impact on not only farm animal welfare, but also on environment, human health, social justice, and food sovereignty. The theme of today's session is just humane, sustainable protein transition. And next slide, you will see there are two speakers today. The first presentation you hear is given by Cinches, the campaign lead of food system strategy for World Animal Protection, who will explain the white paper of just transition. And just for your information, at the time of this session, there are also meetings of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change happening in Bonn, Germany, where estimated about 6,000 delegates from around the world gather to discuss the most pressing environmental issues of the world. And the Just Transition white paper that Vin is going to introduce to you today was also presented in one of the meetings yesterday by WAP team. The second presentation is about another great initiative, the Stop Financing Factory Farming Coalition, introduced by Alessandro Ramazzotti. Alessandro is a social and environmental activist originally from Italy. Alessandro is also acting as a researcher at the International Accountability Project, and he will talk about one of the tools that his coalition is managing called the Early Warning System, a tool that provides critical insights into the financial flows and loans from major development banks worldwide, investing in industrial agricultural projects, contributing to informed advocate efforts. Those are some background information that I hope will help you better prepared for the session, because there's a lot of important and overwhelming information in these two presentations. And with no further holding, I would like to give the floor to Vince for his presentation. And maybe Vince, before you start, you can introduce to our audience more about yourself and your work whenever you're ready, Vince. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Good afternoon, everyone, especially for those who are based in Asia. And good morning as well for those who are in a different time zone. Thank you again for today. Let me just quickly change my presentation. So I'll be presenting the just transition from. So I'm Cinches, currently the campaign lead for our food systems campaign for animal protection in the Philippines, doing a bit of community organizing and environmental protection. I'll be presenting this paper, as mentioned by Fan. This was presented yesterday at the Bonn Climate Conference. It's the UNFCCC subsidiary bodies for key discussions on climate change topics. Basically giving this essential forum, based on the definition on the website, basically enables governments, civil society, scientists, and other stakeholders to exchange ideas and build consensus on global climate action. Why we are engaging with the climate in the climate space? Our campaign now, this engagement on climate change and the just protein transition, this sits within the global theory of change of world animal protection, where we are looking at the global food systems that is not reliant on factory farming, diets primarily plant-based, and large-scale reduction in the number of animals exposed to cruelty of industrial farming. So this is our overall impact that we are looking at, and this is basically the location of our campaign on climate. So when we look at this climate engagement of world animal protection, so this sits within 3 interventions. We are looking at factory farming, is increasingly socially unacceptable and unprofitable. It is no longer seen as unnecessary to feed the world. Second, as well, is changes in the food industry and government policies. When we talk about the problem, we're also talking about solution. Will result in reduction in the total global consumption and production of animal proteins. Another one, I think this is going to be expounded and feed towards the work of Alessandro, is we are also looking at financial engagement, because providing finance to factory farming is an excessive financial risk, resulting in a material reduction in the availability of the public and private finance capital needed to sustain the factory farming models. So it's an important thing. So this one, we are looking at the climate movement, publicly supports the call at UNFCCC for governments to impose a moratorium on factory farming. And key national governments recognize that the growth of factory farming will compromise actions on climate change. So this is the context. And it sits within our 10-year strategy. And you may also access the paper, and I think our colleagues at AFA will be providing me the link. If my presentation is a bit long and will not go over time, I'm happy to have a separate discussion as well through AFA on a offline capacity. So for today's objective, there are 2 things. We would like to understand the impact of industrial animal agriculture and mitigation and adaptation opportunities to shift away from industrial towards agroecology, and what are the levers and blockers to food systems transformation. Important thing, again, another objective for us to look at is how we can shift towards an equitable, humane, and sustainable food systems that promote human rights and protects the environment and animals, while ensuring food sovereignty, meets food security needs, and guaranteeing that people working across food system live in dignity and receive a livable income. Another one, hopefully with this presentation, we'll be able to invite you to be part of a global movement to end industrial animal agriculture and shift towards an equitable, humane, and sustainable food system. So the current impact of industrial agriculture, we are looking at one, around livelihoods. We are looking at human rights and labor rights. We are looking at food sovereignty and food security. We are also looking at public health. We are looking at impacts towards biodiversity. We are looking at climate. Specifically for industrial agriculture, it is basically spreading globally. It's input intensive. Feed crop monocultures and factory farms are straining resources, rapidly degrading farmland and squeezing out smallholders. Industrial livestock systems are replacing traditional forms of livestock production in the global south, where only larger farms are able to compete with the economy scale of not structurally compete in domestic or international markets, leading to concentration in the sector. Basically, big ag is putting pressure on land through expansion of animal feed production, but also to offset their emission. Agricultural land is being grabbed and repurposed for carbon offset biodiversity scheme. In the context of human rights and labor rights, industrial animal agriculture jobs are notoriously dangerous. For example, with slaughterhouse and other workers in the sector at higher risk of respiratory disease, exposure to AMR bacteria, and debilitating injury and death. The hazards of the meatpacking industry have been well documented for more than a century, as they have poor protections for slaughterhouse workers, creating one of the most high-risk industries. If you're looking at industrial fishing, it has also been known to have a poor human rights records and violations, including slave and child labor. In the context of food sovereignty and food security, industrial animal agriculture is often said to be essential for food security. It's very prevalent, but in fact, it undermines food security through the inefficient use of resources. The production of inexpensive food results in limited opportunities for local small-scale farmers to sell their goods, compelling individuals to get big or get out. In the context of public health, we are seeing industrial animal agriculture accounts for 73% of global antibiotics use. The overuse of these products in animals as growth promoters or for the prevention of diseases caused by overcrowding or low welfare, increasing the threat of antimicrobial resistance, has been linked to drug-resistant infections in animals and proteins. So as you can see, agriculture is responsible for over 81% of global ammonia emissions and significantly contributes to PM 2.5 air pollution. And I think some of our colleagues here in the Mekong River could also attest to that, some of the burning that is happening related to expansion of industrial animal agriculture. It has impacts on biodiversity. Industrial animal ag is a primary driver for threats to wildlife, including habitat destruction and degradation, including loss of forests, grasslands, and oceans ecosystems. In the context of climate, our current global food systems is responsible for 1/3 of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions globally. So that is why it's important that the food systems, animal welfare should be central in climate negotiations. The 2022 emissions gap report by the United Nations Environment Program states that any climate stabilization pathway requires a substantial reduction in emissions from food systems. And then we are looking at industrial agriculture at the instance. In the context of animal welfare, animal bred and reared in industrial operations are routinely subjected to extreme physical and mental harm. Most animals are kept in small cages or overcrowded, unsanitary spaces throughout their lives, cannot express natural behaviors. So this is, in summary, the current impact and what brings on us on why we need to transition. So what do we exactly mean by just transition? Just transition, it's basically a principle, a process, and in a practice. A healthy economy and a clean environment can and should coexist. And I think this also, we can also speak clearly towards the difference between, just transition and One Health and One Welfare. But later, One Welfare approach is definitely embedded within the just transition. The process should be fair when we talk about just transition, one that should not cost workers or the community residents their health, environment, jobs, or financial security. Any losses should be fairly compensated. So when we talk about just transition, it's basically a concept of no one is being left behind. People who are most affected by pollution, the frontline workers, and the frontline community should be in the leadership of crafting policy solutions. So they are not just being consulted, but they need to be at the center when we talk about developing solutions. The Just Transition Roadmap project, just a bit of like a background on this. It's a coalition of organizations dedicated to ensuring a just transition away from industrial animal agriculture system. Why phasing out of industrial animal agriculture, create and rally behind common vision for equitable, humane, and sustainable food systems. Who's involved in this? As I mentioned, a coalition of organizations such as Center for Biological Diversity, World Animal Protection, Global Forest Coalition, Brighter Green, Aquatic Life Institutes. We have contributors from Youth in Agroecology and Restoration Network, JANU, Volunteer for Environment, or volunteers, youth volunteers for the environment, African Biodiversity Network, Real Food Systems, New Roots Institute, Care About Climate, Stray Dog Institute. What we want to do basically is we wanted to make sure that we are mainstreaming social and environmental impacts of industrial animal agriculture model amongst governments, create and rally behind a common vision of equitable, humane, sustainable food systems, and agreed pathways for food systems transformation to speak of a united voice and create power for change. So what we have been doing, hopefully, how did we come up with the process? And in the paper, we had consultation amongst impacted groups, including food chain workers, organizations, union, farm workers, meat processing workers, including smallholder farmers, fishers, pastoralists, women, youth in agriculture. That also includes indigenous peoples, peasant communities, and just transition organizations. So there's over 120 individuals representing 72 organizations from 35 countries have provided feedback to this. So when we say what do we exactly mean equitable, humane, and sustainable system, we wanted to address inequality and achieve food sovereignty while addressing the climate drivers that create injustice, involvement of women, smallholders, pastoralists, small-scale fishers, and food workers. And cultural, we are looking at cultural variation systems that produce our food, prioritize the well-being of people, animals, and our planet. We are looking at consumption of animal, when we talk about this equitable, humane, and sustainable food systems, consumption of animal products in high consumption countries, it needs to be significantly decreased. The power that the multinational meat, dairy, and seafood corporations, sorry.
Yeah, excuse me, Vince, you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. So this is basically what we want from a equitable, humane, and sustainable food systems. Just to wrap up, for this, we are looking at levers of change, the governance around strengthen food system governance, promote agroecological practices, shift towards diet within planetary and social boundaries. We are looking at addressing blockers to the transition within governance, finance, and diet shifts. And then there are a few next steps for this, and I'm happy to talk through maybe off session and if there's going to be communications post this. So apologies, there's a lot of things to say, but hopefully I was able to present some of the key principles, areas of just protein transition, and some of the key next steps. Thank you so much. Turning it over to our host.
Oh, thank you very much, Vince, for such an informative presentation. It seems to me that the Just Transition white paper has incorporated like most of the important aspects to make sure the new food system is fair and sustainable to everyone, human and animal and environment. And this is great to hear that there are already 72 organizations from 35 countries already engaged in the initiative. For everyone, if you are interested in learning more about the initiative, just let us know, leave your email address or contact us so we can host another side event with Vince and for you to even learn more about that. And even if you want to get involved, then we're here to be the bridge. Now I would like to shift the spotlight to our next speaker, Alessandro. Alessandro, please turn on your camera when you're ready and maybe give our audience a little bit of introduction about yourself and your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan. And yeah, thank you to AFA for inviting to present at this webinar. And yeah, thank you also, Vince, for a great presentation. It was really interesting. I'm Alessandro. I'm from Italy originally, but currently and temporarily based in Laos. And I work at International Accountability Project, which is an organization tracking the work of multilateral development banks in in order to connect communities that are affected by development projects to the banks that finance them, and ensure that their rights are respected, as well as the rights of the environment and animals throughout the system. We developed, IAP, International Accountability Project, developed the early warning system database that Tan introduced at the beginning. And it's a database that tracks, I will talk about this more later, but it tracks 16 development banks, ensuring communities access to information in a timely manner. And International Accountability Project is also part of the Subfinancing Factory Farming campaign, that it's a campaign, a global campaign with 8, if I'm not wrong, core members, which come from different backgrounds. They have diverse views, but they have a common goal of stopping all public financing to factory farming. And because of these diverse, different backgrounds and views, today my presentation will focus on my own views based on the work we're doing with the coalition, but I will not necessarily represent the network's opinion on these matters. And this as an initial presentation. Now I will try to share my slides here. So yes, today I will talk, I hope not to repeat what Vince already said, but we'll try to give an overview about the role of multilateral development banks and the role they play in agriculture, industrial agriculture systems, and the role they could play in promoting the just, humane, and sustainable protein transition. So for those of you who are not very familiar with multilateral development banks, they are, well, multilateral, so they are owned by more than 2 states, governments, and they promote development projects that are supposed to be long-term and have long-term impacts, both positive and negative, but and they are banks. So they are cooperative financial institutions investing funds, money in development projects. Indeed, they have a lot of money, big funds that governments provide them through government funds, so public money. And thanks to these funds, they have a lot of political influence and financial leverage, and they can influence development processes worldwide. Here on the side of the slide, you can see a few of these banks. They can be regional, with a regional reach or a global reach. So the Asian Development Bank is focused on Asian countries. The IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, and they have a worldwide reach. The New Development Bank is a quite recently created one with China and Russia, I think, having a lead role in that. And all of these have something in common. They often lack accountability, transparency, adequate policies, and respect for communities, environment, and animals. So in the context of factory farming, as I was saying, they have a global reach. And here you can see some news pieces. They invest into the expansion of factory farming systems from Ukraine to Latin America to Vietnam, everywhere in the world. They provide large amounts of money. That means big expansion models usually. And they serve smallholders and big corporations alike. But sometimes, many times, smallholders are part of supply chains of big corporations. So in the end, these investments risk creating more concentration of power, corporate power, as well as increased risk of corporate capture. And banks, as we noticed during our analysis with the Subfinancing Factory Farming campaign and the early warning system, is that they invest all along the value chain, as we'll see in a while in examples. This Subfinancing Factory Farming campaign coalition, as a brief overview, we engage in advocacy, both outsider and insider. That means like it's insider engagement. There are some members of the coalition that directly engage with staff members of these institutions, these banks, to promote a mindset change, promote changes starting from the bank. We also do outsider engagement. That means we draft public statements, public letters of concern that we distribute among partners, and we try to push the banks to change from the outside. We organize actions, that means protests and demonstrations. The last one was at the World Bank Spring Meetings in April, and you can see a picture of the event in the slide. We try to promote movement building worldwide, so involving partners and organizations committed to the same goals. And thanks to these, we also are able to achieve, as you can see again in the slide, we achieved our biggest achievement so far is the IDB Invest dropped a loan to Marfrig Corporation in Brazil. And yeah, and we focus on mostly big corporations such as Louis Dreyfus Company, CMI Alimentos in the Americas, but also in Asia, in Vietnam, we asked to divest from a project investing in Mavin Corporation in Vietnam for the production of pigs. We also, as I was saying, do data collection and trend analysis thanks to the early warning system, the tool of International Accountability Project. And soon we hope to release an interactive tool as the one you can see in the slide. That is for the energy sector, but we hope to release one for the animal agriculture sector as well. So stay tuned. Our work fits within the Just Product Transition because these banks have a big leverage, so they can influence development processes and decisions at the national level as well, and worldwide. They are public banks, so theoretically, at least, they should be more accountable and transparent in their operations. They provide support both at infrastructure and policy level, so their potential to change things is quite big, and for the long term. And they can also support better practices sometimes, which are the ones that we want to promote. Last but not least, they are still financing conventional animal agriculture, which is something we want to stop, as the name says. Now, the examples that I will provide in the next slides, we'll try to compare two big transitions that are the Just Product Transition and the Just Energy Transition. Multilateral development banks at the moment are investing a lot in the Just Energy Transition, but they are apparently not giving enough attention, as much attention to the animal agriculture sector. So as you can see, the energy sector is slowly moving, but increasingly faster moving towards a better transition, while in the animal agriculture sector, they are still financing large corporations and large-scale farming. So what we need, I think we need a change of mindset. As Vince was also saying, we don't need to consider meat as an essential product that needs to be heavily subsidized by governments and multilateral development banks. As you can see here, there is an example from Uzbekistan where the ADB explicitly recognized meat as an essential food product. If we don't change this mindset, then it will be harder to achieve Just Product Transition. And this already happened in the energy sector. We started to consider coal and oil and gas as bad, and governments, banks committed to not financing those anymore, at least in words, of course. That's the first step. We also need a comprehensive approach. So we noticed some projects financed by the ADB in this case that promote education that seems to be moving towards industrialization of agriculture systems. So this Bangladesh Agriculture University, on the website, they say that the aim of their educational agenda is to empower farmers, students to increase productivity and production, which is not something we want to see. We want to see more education moving towards empowering people to implement really sustainable practices within the agriculture sector. This is already happening in the energy sector more and more. MDBs, multilateral development banks, are financing a diversification of skills and practices. So we want to see that as well in the agriculture sector. There is a need for different infrastructure. We noticed a lot of projects that are financing big infrastructure projects explicitly and clearly connected to animal agriculture. Global systems, as you can see, this is a project financed by the Dutch Development Bank in Iraq, and it promotes the import of grains from Brazil and Argentina, where these grains are probably causing other environmental impacts. And such big infrastructure is something that we don't need if we want to switch, well, to shift to more sustainable proteins production. We also need that revised policy framework, and as we can see, as we saw, the multilateral development banks can influence and can support the implementation of policies that ultimately lead to industrial animal agriculture, either expansion or continuation. So this, in the example, is a project that we recently raised concerns about with the Subfinancing Factory Farming Campaign members. And yeah, the project was supporting the implementation of policies that apparently aim to develop the animal agriculture system in Bangladesh in an industrial way. So this policy framework is also very important to address. We need more better practices. Indeed, we also notice not only bad things, but also better practices. So projects that apparently aimed to mitigate the impacts of factory farming or promote alternative agri-food systems or alternative diets. Here are a few examples. It's not a conclusive list, but we want to see these happening more. In the tool and white paper that we will release soon, hopefully, we will also try to analyze the trends in the better practices sector. And it's very hard to define a better practice, of course, but yeah, in general, it's about mitigation of impacts and promoting a shift to alternative systems. So thanks to this analysis, what I would broadly recommend to multilateral development banks is to provide subsidies for alternative diets and not meat-based, to apply strict checks on the supply chains, on the full value chain of factory farming. So that means not only not providing funds to large corporations, but also checking who supplies them and applying a human rights due diligence approach throughout the supply chains. We also want, I would like to see promoted better access to inputs that are sustainable, not too impactful on the environment and people. And as well as practices like no-tilling, as I think, in the slide before, one of the better practices promoted no-till farming, which is better practice in the sector. So this was an overview about what we are doing, and you can get involved in the Self-Financing Factory Farming campaign. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter coming from the Early Warning System, where we collect the most relevant projects of the week financed by multilateral development banks in the industrial animal agriculture sector. And just reach out to me and I can add you to the list. You can also connect in case you want to share ideas or comments, or you have more questions about what we do, or you can contribute information about your local context and how the development of industrial animal agriculture affect your lives or the lives of people you know. If you find yourself affected from a big, large-scale infrastructure in the industrial animal agriculture sector, please also reach out. And in general, if you want to contribute to Self-Financing Factory Farming, feel free to reach out. That's it for me, and yeah, here you can find the links to the early warning system database and to the self-financing factory farming website. And yeah, thank you for your attention. I hope it was informative. Enjoy. Back to you, Tan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. I love the background sound of the roosters. It's very Asian, particularly Asian background. Yes. Thank you for the information on your presentation. It's very informative. The early warning system and particularly the Stop Financing Factory Farming Coalition are both much needed for a just sustainable protein transition. We all know that the agricultural industry is a big one, and they are currently backed by banks. So the world needs a stronger and much more effective collaboration to tackle those power and the issues they cause. Many members of our organizations in our network supported the appeal against the International Finance Corporation that belonged to Marvin. So it's just a simple example of how collaboration happen in real world. And I hope to see more groups collaborating with each other to make a stronger voice for animals, for human, and for the world. We do have some questions that is prepared here. So I'd like to invite the two speakers, Vince and Alessandro, to open your camera, and I'll read out some of the question here addressed to you both, and hope that you can help answer those. Sorry, I need to sneeze a bit. We do have the first question addressed to Alessandro. Is that do multilateral development banks take into account animal welfare issues? And can you explain a bit further about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Tan. They do increasingly, but it's a recent development, I would say, because, for instance, the Asian Development Bank in their environmental and social policy from 2009, they don't have anything about animal welfare. In 2014, I think the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, they adopted just in 2014 some provisions about ensuring animal welfare in their operations. So it's a quite recent development. It's not something happening since a long time, but it's good to observe that it's a growing trend. So more and more multilateral development banks are paying attention to that.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you. And we have the next question from Vince. So what are the differences between WAP's Just Transition and the One Welfare? Because it's simple, both the initiative covers the health of animals, or the welfare of animals, the health of the planet, and human health in their goal.
Thank you so much, Tan. I think in Asia we have this saying of same but different. So there's a lot of similarities in there, but One Health and One Welfare approach is definitely embedded within the Just Protein Transition framework. So meaning when we talk about raising animal welfare standards within that systems, it will basically have co-benefits for animals, including the livelihood of people. What we're also trying to do right now, when we look at One Health, One Welfare, and Just Transition, we are basically looking at policy coherence among different conventions and global mechanisms. Meaning, when we look at food systems approach, it should look at sustainability themes holistically and not separately. So meaning like climate, biodiversity, welfare, health, human rights, among others. So yeah, thank you.
Yep, thank you very much, Vince, for that. This question could be addressed to you both. So, what are the challenges to your initiative to be successful?
Vince, want to go? Or... Okay, I can try to answer that. For self-financing factory farming, I think probably pushing for this mindset change within the banks is a bit complicated, because multilateral development banks are financial institutions, and their views are very much projected on promoting industrial expansion in all sectors, not only agriculture. So making them understand that we actually need a change towards smaller scale, towards more localized production and not global trade of agricultural goods might be, it's a bit complicated, I think. And it takes a long time. And yeah, I would say that.
Thanks. I think that's very what Alessandro mentioned is really important. I think from us, there are a few things that we are considering. For example, if you are looking at our targets, like the factory farms or industrial agriculture, and then the governments, or even including financial institutions, there's a lot of overlapping interests and controls. Among that, for example, most of the finance going on right now, and I think we are learning a lot from the climate movement, is really towards the harmful subsidies of factory farming. And I think even in the context of diet, the propaganda machine of the factory farming and the industrial ag is really looking at meat as central to meeting economic SDGs, livelihood, including nutrition. If you're going to look at dietary guidelines right now, it's really centered around meat. So those are things. So many aspects that we are looking at. But I also would like to look at a few things organizationally. In terms of resources going to civil society organizations for food systems transformation, it's very, very small. And I think a lot of grassroots organizations or NGOs can basically benefit from an increase in, financial support or sustainable support that's basically determined by organizations instead of being determined by or donor driven. That one. Second, I think there's also an opportunity for us really to start seeing a sort of like a theory of change, where every effort, complementary effort of animal welfare organization, human rights, are basically working towards a sort of like transforming the food systems, right? So I think it would be, it's also good right now as an opportunity, because this conversation that AFA is facilitating actually provides visibility and the importance of, why we need to work together, interconnectedness, how each interventions are contributing to addressing and, transforming the whole of food systems, especially in Asia, particularly because, I think for Asia, both opportunity and threats. We are an emerging economy. Potentially, there's going to be an increase in production of factory farming, and potentially, if the Global North campaign will become so strong, some of those factory farming will be dislocated or relocated to Global South. So we need to have a blocking strategy around it. And I think there's a lot of initiatives right now around, scaling up of humane and sustainable protein. Singapore has done it, and I think the recent report from GFI really puts Asia, potentially we can be a global hub for solutions work. So that's what we are trying to do now. So the just protein transition is an important piece of work as a solution piece of work that will bring us away from, industrial farming, feeding the growing number of population, giving choices to the increasing population as well, and consuming capacity of the Asian nation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vince. And I totally agree. You did mention in your answer about SDG. For general public, can you explain it a little bit further about the terms and who are adopting that?
sustainable sustainable development goals. And I think it's a UN framework. There's a lot of items within sustainable development goals. A lot of governments are adhering to it. Even companies, even with their environmental and social goals as well. So this can be an opportunity really in looking at, again, it would be good for us to really look at some of the coherence potentially of it overlapping and how we can work together. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Vince. And do you want to add anything about that, Alessandro? Is the banks normally adopt SDG as well, or are they supposed to?
Yes, they do, but I don't have much information on this. But from what I heard, like nowadays there is an anti ESG movement in the US, which is influencing a bit like the approach to environmental and social governance worldwide, and probably these affect the SDGs as well. But I'm not so sure. And yeah, and the way that multilateral development banks approach those as well. But that's.
Yeah, thank you, Alessandro. That's interesting. That's there's already someone who are anti the SDG in some of the countries. We have another question for Vince. In your presentation, you talk about the steps to ensure the nutrition food produced to agroecology production system. The question is, what steps can be taken to ensure nutrition food produced through agroecology program system and accessible and affordable to all communities? Thank you.
That's there's a lot of questions in there that is compounded, but thank you for that. It's really good. One, I think agroecology as a principle. Let me just put it in here. The definition of agroecology, and we are looking at the definition of La Via Campesina for agroecology, where there's a food sovereignty, smallholders being controlling the production. So basically, it's a counter proposal to industrial or factory farming means of production. So concentration towards it. It's more of towards a democratic mechanisms of producing food. We are agroecology. We are also looking at humane and sustainable means. So produce sustainably. And then we also are looking at, we wanted to influence that in the context of animal welfare. And I think to really enable that right now, there's a lot of things that can be provided coming from finance and coming from the government, right? Aside from us targeting some of these corporations on their targets around meat reductions or maybe a protein transition roadmap. So potentially, there are potential blockers to, and there's also a lot of misconception when we talk about humane and sustainable protein, because I think when we talk about it, a lot of people would think these are highly processed. We are already talking about the hamburgers or the hot dogs, when in fact it's not. If you are going to look at, Asia has a strong culinary traditions of plant-based proteins or innovations. That's basically whole of food systems. It's not just about processed food. So, however, so again, to enable, I think in terms of price parity, even innovations, there needs to be strong investment towards it. And I think that the latest report coming from GFI has provided some of the initiatives coming from government investing, like what Singapore is doing on how they can innovate, right? So that one. So innovations and sustainable protein, but at the same time, the priority, some of the support should be invested towards small, sustainable production, which is the agroecological means of producing our food. So when we talk about humane and sustainable protein, it should also be produced humanely, right? And then justly. So that's what we are trying to promote on that. It's not just towards, of course, there's going to be a mix in how the food is going to be produced, right? So, but at the same time, how we envision there needs to be strong, the food producers, small scale holders will also have a very strong role to play in that.
Well, that's a lot of information to take in, and why we have you and why we're on the side on the just protein transition. How can we ensure that the frontline workers and the fence-like communities are not only heard about, but also actively leading the policy-making pressure process to ensure the sustainable protein transition?
Yeah,
doesn't seem like a really simple work, right?
Yeah, exactly. It could also be a rhetorical question, right? So because potentially we just need to go beyond consulting or going to their communities, but a movement should basically happen that will be started, emanated, or enabled by the grassroots community themselves, instead of NGOs or civil society organizations. Major NGOs are basically dictating that this should be the agenda. But what we need to make sure, for example, like right now in the Bonn Climate Conference, even in climate negotiation, it's important that the voices of the global South needs to be represented there. For example, like in Asia, and the voices of the global South should basically emanate from grassroots community, aside from NGOs that are working in the global South. For example, like Consumers Foundation, perhaps farmers, smallholders, including fishers or indigenous communities. So yeah, because there's basically a diverse differences in terms of agenda setting and what is being put forward in the negotiating table. What we are also trying to be here, for example, like stop financing factory farming. We are not with us at World Animal Protection, we're not here to basically dictate, but basically bring in, reflect some of the perspective and agenda and voices in the position paper that we are developing, some of the interventions that we are making. So a sort of like a bridging, right? So, but we are not reinventing things for the communities. Yeah, thanks.
Well, that's great. We don't need to reinvent new wheels. Yes, definitely. Totally agree. We have another question that will be can be addressed to you both. So both of your initiatives have some call to actions part, right? And do you have any different call to action for NGOs and one for the public, or how they how they can be differentiated?
I can go. Okay. Sorry. Call to action to NGOs. Well, as I was saying in the slides during my presentation, you can reach out to us and get in touch. Contribute information is a great way to. I mean, from your local context, because sorry. Another point we struggle a bit on is to evaluate projects that we see from multilateral development banks on the basis of the local context, because of course projects may be the same, but depending on the local context, their impacts and benefits might differ a lot. So we are always searching for networking opportunities with people who live in countries in contexts that are affected by factory farming, or if you have ideas, innovative ideas for alternative systems, those are also very much appreciated. And yeah, provide your views, share your views, comments, and ideas with us. That's always very appreciated. You can also, yeah, for as I was saying, yeah, subscribe to our newsletter to get more information, because I think sharing information about what's happening in the field is a first step to raise awareness among the public as well. So again, feel free to reach out and do that. And yeah, I think that's it from us. Stop financing factory farming.
For me, I just would like to sell that the food systems transformation is an opportunity for us to reach the widest stakeholders and audiences, especially in Asia, as it's a bit new but an important space. That one. Another one would be in concrete. I know there's a lot of things to happen, but we're also looking at sort of we can localize the localization of the framework. For example, if we can use the Just Transition White Paper, localization of that paper to local context, and maybe develop some national advocacy. We are basically looking at collecting some of potential case studies as well. So that one. And then I think what is important is really to start really talking about the importance of food systems transformation, just protein transition in the context of animal welfare, or sort of like within the animals, people, and planet framework, especially in the space, particularly for Asia. This has the food systems became prominent last year in the UNFCCC negotiations. In fact, it has become so prominent that major food companies are sending major lobby groups. And I think this has become an opportunity. It will become a crowded space, and then there's an opportunity towards the end of the year how we can push it forward, right? So that one. So hopefully we can have and start a discussion on protein transition and find ways how we can, work collaboratively. There's a lot of NGOs who are already working in it, but we need to have more NGOs, especially in the global South space.
Well, that's so great to hear, Vince. I'm glad to hear that it's a new initiative that has already got some impact, and we hope that the initiative will be will reach to wider and broader audience, not only in global South but everywhere in this world. We have another question for this time is for Alessandro. So just in case, for instance, if there's one local group or a small NGO or an NGO in general want to challenge the development bank or even like a commercial bank in their region for funding, financing factory farming, what factors should be taken into account when that group challenges the banks? Thank you.
Thank you, Tan. I think, again, I'm sorry for repeating myself, but local context. So the cultural traditions associated with meat consumption and vegetable consumption, like food traditions, and also like if you want to reach out to an multilateral development bank, a big leverage points are the environment and climate change nowadays, and they are increasingly paying attention to animal welfare. So that's also a good point to raise, and always everywhere impacts on communities. So if you can carry out studies about the impacts on the grounds, on the water, on like livelihoods in general, that's also great. And of course, as Vince was saying, like there is a lack of resources to do that most of the times, but yes, I would say those are good leverage points. And yes, I think as Stop Financing Factory Farming is doing, engaging with banks both at the inside level and outside level is a good technique as well. So try to find a contact within the bank with whom you can interact and get an insider engagement, but at the same time push with the outside community, like with the community, like raise, amplify the voices of the impacted communities, because those are also really important. Stop Financing Factory Farming campaign, the coalition is supporting a community in Ecuador at the moment that is affected by large-scale poultry farming, and for years now they've tried to raise complaints against the company, and and the financiers of this company are not listening much, but pushing more and more is helping in some ways.
Yeah, I think it's at least they know that they are being targeted and change could come in the near future. I hope so. There's another question to you, particularly Alessandro. So does your organization prioritize sustainable protein initiative in discussion with multilateral development banks based on the social pressure or through financial and risk analysis? With a focus on aligning with the broader SDG impacts.
Sorry, I didn't fully get the question. If my organization aligns with the Just Broader Transition, or
no, just I'll put it shorter. So is your organization prioritize sustainable protein transition in your discussion with the banks based on the social pressure or through the financial and risk analysis?
We are going to do that hopefully soon. Until now, International Accountability Project didn't, and the Stop-Financing Factory Farming campaign as well, it's going through an organizational process because of the diverse backgrounds of the organizations. So yeah, but I think when we'll develop this tool that I introduced during the presentation, we'll have a further tool for advocacy and strategizing the advocacy that we are carrying out and aligning that with the Just Broader Transition, introducing the topic of the Just Broader Transition in our advocacy strategies and in relation to the data analysis that we'll release.
Yep, thank you. And we have another question addressed to you both. Obviously, everything is interlinked. Every work is interlinked, and not only animal welfare work, but like other civil society movement are linked to like this social justice. So how could other civil society organizations engage in your work? Anyone want to speak first? Vince, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think what we can do is basically organize sort of like a localization of the Just Protein Transition white paper. We can have a discussion on that, and then I think we can create like a sort of like a basis of unity on that. And then if there's going to be initiatives, we're happy to partner. And then we basically also have a dedicated team engaging multilateral agencies such as BON and Climate. I think you have heard of her. Angel is one of our representatives at AfA, overall AfA. And we have Elodie representing during AfAD. So both of them are basically, Elodie right now is leading the white paper. Angel is basically looking at the external engagement with government. Second, not so sure if it's too early, but hopefully we are going to launch a sort of like a consultation or organizing a consultation on protein transition in Southeast Asia or Asia in the coming weeks, but we are still finalizing. But we really would like to build something towards the climate negotiation end of this year and towards Belém, hopefully by next year as well. Yeah.
For us, I would say it's same. We are always happy to partner and to learn from local NGOs, national or local NGOs, to hear about your opinion, to hear about people's opinion on the ground, and adapt our strategies accordingly. And of course, if you are affected, like if anyone is affected by a development project, we can help placing like putting the community in touch with the bank, the financier, and trying to stop the project or delay the project, ensure that local communities are adequately consulted and involved in the development process. So that's what we can do. And soon we are going to release this tool. So again, stay tuned and we'll distribute it widely so it can be useful to partners and everyone who wants to challenge industrial factory farming. And yeah, and in that case,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just to conclude that if you have any doubts about how to use it, then just reach out. That's it. And yeah, stay tuned on our social media. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much, both Vince and Alessandro, for a very informative session and a lot of information to take in. We all feel like this is really great initiative that potentially have the global impact. So yeah, thank you for being part of it, and thank you for sharing today. We hope that we have the contact, and as we mentioned earlier, if any of you in the audience want to learn more about the work, contribute, or even send some questions, just come to us and we will connect you with the relevant people behind this. Yeah, with that, I'd like to say huge thank you to both our prestigious speaker, and would like to hand over the floor back to our Asila for some announcement of the coming event. Thank you.